Thanks, Fran. Welcome back. Vanessa Feltz here, sitting in for Jeremy Vine. Coming up, I'll be asking, should rioters be evicted from their council houses? But first, Jane Whedon and Rush Hour. A council house tenant in the London borough of Wandsworth has become the first person to be served with an eviction notice as a result of the riots. Wandsworth Council says the tenant's son has appeared in court, charged in connection with the rioting and looting in Clapham Junction last Monday night. Prime Minister David Cameron has expressed his support for councils which go down this route. Wandsworth isn't the only one. Nottingham, Salford, Westminster, Greenwich and Hammersmith and Fulham councils all plan to evict tenants who were involved in the riots. The government's also considering ways of allowing the courts to take people's benefits away from them if they were involved in the disorder. Maybe you agree and you're pleased that councils are refusing to support people who behaved in such a reckless and destructive manner. Or maybe you're concerned that the desire to condemn and punish the rioters could make any underlying problems even worse. You can give us a call on 0500 288 291 or email vine@bbc.co.uk. And I'm joined now by Conservative Councillor Guy Senior, an executive member of Wandsworth Council, and joining us from our studio in Swindon, journalist Sonia Poulton. She set up the People Against Riot Evictions group on Facebook. So let's kick off with Guy. Guy, how does it work? Do you start eviction proceedings when somebody is first charged? In other words, they haven't yet been found guilty.
Yes, we do. The reason for that is the procedure can take quite a long time. It can take up to 8 months. So if you add on top of that the time the criminal trial would take, then you could talk of a gap of at least 12 months. So that's why we start the process now. Of course, if the individuals concerned are found innocent, then we stop the process. But what I would like to say is this is absolutely nothing new for us. It's long been a revision of our tenancy agreements that if a tenant or anyone in their household commits a serious criminal offence, then we have the power to evict them. And we have been doing this for many years. In this case, of course, has just got a lot more prominence.
What about the question of what happens next if you do evict a family from their council house because one of them or many of them have been rioting? Where do they go? Doesn't the problem simply get shifted further along the same street?
Well, they'll have to find some premises on their own. They may or may not be entitled, depending on their personal situation, to housing benefit assistance. But what we're saying is that we want our housing tenants to be lawful and law-abiding, as the vast majority of them are. Council housing comes at a rent 40% of the national average, security of tenure, the right to buy, and we think that's a great privilege and something that people should have by obeying the law.
And what are people supposed to do if they're thrown out of their houses and they don't have the wherewithal, the cash, the influence or the means to find somewhere else to sleep that night?
Well, so far that hasn't been a problem when we've done this in the past, that people have managed to find somewhere to go. Yes, it doesn't happen overnight, as I said. It depends on the court hearing. The judge no doubt takes any extenuating circumstances into account, and it can be a period of up to 8 months. So there's a lot of time for people to prepare.
Won't they simply, though, go to a B&B that is paid for and supported by the council anyway, so it's simply shifting them and their problem somewhere else but costing the same amount of money in the long run?
It's very unlikely that the council will actually be paying for that. Because if you break the terms of your lease, you're deemed to be intentionally homeless, and therefore we often don't have any duties towards such people.
Don't councils have a duty to house people, all people, anyone in need of a home? And I'm thinking in terms of people with children, with babies, with elderly relatives. Are all of them to be pushed into the street as a result of one rioter's behaviour, do you think?
Well, that depends. That's for the judge to consider whether there are extenuating circumstances in making the eviction order. This is the start of the process, but we are saying very clearly we want our tenants to obey the law, and if they don't, then there will be consequences of that behaviour.
All right, let's bring in Sonia Poulton, the journalist. Sonia,
Hi, Vanessa.
Hello, Sonia. You've set up People Against Riot Evictions. It's a group on Facebook.
Indeed.
Do you think, though, that Guy has a point when he says, look, council housing is a privilege, it's for people who uphold the law and are decent citizens. If they don't, then they will get what's coming to them?
I hardly support anything that Guy says in all reality. I set up this group because I am extremely concerned about the knee-jerk and ill-conceived reaction that the government, the coalition, have taken to this situation. Let's be real about this. We are talking about very serious social issues. When 5% of the nation own 80% of the wealth, you are going to have problems. I am not an apologist for what took place last week. I sat back and watched just the same as everybody else in this country, and I was appalled by what took place. But we have to be real about this. Evicting people is no solution whatsoever.
But when you say real social issues, we know now, when we've heard of the individual stories of people taking trainers, wearing the very latest of possible fashionable trainers on their feet at the time. So we're not talking about barefoot people in need of shoes. And we don't presume that any of the people who took flat screen TVs don't have their own tellies at home. We know they already have tellies, they already have trainers, and we know that much of the rioting was orchestrated via BlackBerry Messenger service, so we assume they have expensive state-of-the-art telephones. So you're not really talking about the have-nots here. Nobody's telling them to eat cake, are they?
That's not the issue, though. The issue is, should we be evicting people who have been caught up in the rioting? If we're following Mr. Senior's principle, they're already guilty until proven innocent. Look, we've got to be really real about this. There's a big perspective. We're talking about possibly an estimated cost of £100 million to clear it up, and yet we managed to fund the bankers for £131 billion. This country has been looted from the top to the bottom, and these are issues that count. Now, I want to address Mr. Senior because he hasn't responded to any of my emails, so I would like to ask Mr. Senior some questions.
Well, I must admit, it's quite hard to respond to when you veer so swiftly from the riots to the bankers and back again. I mean, let's bring Guy Senior in and give him a chance. She's saying it's a big issue. We've heard about the big society, David Cameron embracing it fulsomely and effusively. Do you think that this is emblematic of the big society to chuck out of their houses rioters? Do you think Sonia has a point, Guy?
I think it is very important to show that we have absolutely no tolerance to crime. The people that I'm really concerned about are the people who lost their homes on Monday night. Several people in the area I represent had their homes burnt out immediately. Not an 8-month delay in a consideration by a judge of whether or not they should be evicted, but their homes utterly destroyed. Those are the people that I'm really concerned about.
I completely agree with you, Mr. Senior. The difference between you and I is I'm concerned with all the people, not just some part of society. And that's what we have to look at. Look, please, we really have to address this seriously because I'm not convinced that you've thought this out fully. Okay, where are we going to put this, please?
This is a policy we've had for many years.
Indeed, and that might explain why we... Well, I don't think so, because we had an awful lot of rioting and looting and social unrest on our streets last week. Now, one of the issues that has arisen over this last week is the problems that we as a community, all of our communities, have with the police. By effectively saying we're going to evict people who've been looting... No, I'm not. Do not interrupt me, because I didn't interrupt you. I gave you a huge amount of time to explain your piece, so please give me that respect too. What I'm saying is if you are actually threatening people with eviction, that will put people off going to the police, and I will give you one example on our group. One woman came on and relayed a scenario which involved some teenagers from Tottenham. They went along with it, they got caught up with it, absolutely punished them, but the mother, who's now been in her council house for 3 generations, is on the verge of losing it. Is this right? Of course it's not. It couldn't possibly be.
Well, let him answer you, Sonia. Sonia says, is it right to punish the mother for the sins of the children, especially, I might add, if they're not children, if they're over 18? Is she responsible for them morally or indeed legally? And is it right to turf an innocent and hard-working, decent person out of their council house because of what her adult children might have done?
All of our tenants, when they start their lease with us, sign up to a lease which provides very clearly that they are responsible for those who live with them, and that if one of those people commits a criminal offence, then they may well be evicted. That was discussed at some length with tenants' representatives when we introduced it some time ago, and it has received their support.
Guy, thank you very much. Sonia, thank you to you. What do you think of this one? Give me a ring, 0500 288 291. You can email vine@bbc.co.uk should rioters be evicted from their council houses. Toto and hold the line. It's 1:20. Vanessa in for Jeremy. This is from David in St Albans. He says, I don't live in a council house, but I was convicted of a crime 2 years ago and have a criminal record. I lost my job, I couldn't pay my rent, and I lost my house. If this is all right for people who operate in the so-called private sector, then it's all right for people in the public-funded sector. There should not be one rule for one and one rule for another. Tom says, of course, council house tenants should be evicted if they or their kids are found guilty of rioting or looting. Prison or community service is no deterrent. They're laughing at us. We're too soft. Mark, this is a definite no. They did wrong. We know that. They know that. And the punishment in a court will harm them for years. But to lose their homes too? That's got to be a no-no. Do the MPs living in their mansions get evicted when they were found dipping into the taxpayers' pot? And Paul in Southampton says, I don't think the mother and sister of an 18-year-old rioter should be made homeless. He should pay the price, but why should they suffer for his crimes? You can get good kids from bad families too, so why punish siblings for the behaviour of their brother or sister? Uprooting a child from their home could damage their chances for life. Sharon in Gwent, there are several thousand people waiting to get into council accommodation, so why should these people be housed when they are breaking the law? And Rick in Bury in Lancashire, I thought it was illegal to make people homeless and that the council have a responsibility to house people. This Christian lady with a daughter should not be punished because her son got caught up in all this trouble. He's done something stupid in the heat of the moment, but you can't evict his family. This is the government trying to sound tough, but have they really thought it through? My name is Roberta Flatt. Sharon in Streatham in London. Hi, Sharon.
Hello, Vanessa.
Do you think that council tenants should be evicted if they or any of their family took part in the riots?
Absolutely not, no. I think we have a criminal justice system in this country and it should apply equally to everybody. I think it's completely unfair that two people who do the exact same offence could get such wildly different punishments. Somebody could get a caution or a fine, but somebody else could lose their home just because they happen to be in council accommodation instead of private rented.
And yet you heard the councillor there from Wandsworth saying council housing is a privilege, it's not a right, and if you abuse the privilege, then they have the right and have long held the right to kick you out.
But how can it be fair? I mean, they may well have that right, but if they do have that right, then that is not fair. They shouldn't be able to do worse to somebody who happens to be a council tenant than somebody who happens to be in private rented. I mean, to two people, if you were the council tenant could be paying their council tax and their rent out of their own pocket. They might not be getting benefits, but somebody who's in private rented accommodation could be having their rent paid for by housing benefit and yet be able to keep their property, whereas the council tenant and all their family would lose their home. I just think it's completely unfair.
Did you see much of what was going on in the rioting in Streatham? It wasn't far from you.
It was closer than I wanted it to be,
I'm sure.
But we were safe.
Sharon, thanks very much. Let's go to Joanne in Bacup. Hello, Joanne.
Hello.
So Sharon there saying, look, we've got due procedure in the courts. We don't need to kick people out of their homes too, but I don't think you agree with that.
I don't think the criminal justice is working at the moment, and I think that we need to have some sort of deterrent. As it was said, there are thousands on waiting lists waiting for homes, so why should those who abuse the privilege of having these homes be allowed to stay in them?
I know, but you presuppose, I suppose, that the whole family has gone out rioting. What if it was an 18 or 19-year-old son or daughter? The parents are thoroughly decent people. They knew nothing about it. You know, I've got daughters of 22 and 25, and God love them. I don't know where they are every hour of the day and night.
Yes, but you shouldn't be expected to know where they are when they reach 21. But an 18-year-old, it's still parental responsibility because they're not grown up enough.
Well, 18-year-old, they're adults, aren't they, in every
well,
way?
They're supposed to be adults, but show me an adult at 18.
You don't...
I'm afraid there's being an adult because of your age, but there's also being an adult because you take responsibility for your actions.
So you don't think, Joanne, that there's some kind of element here of the government wanting justice to be seen to be done in the most dramatic of possible ways?
I think where the problem is, I think it's previous governments that haven't put the foot down. And I think what's going on at the moment, and I'm not saying that I'm definitely conservative, but what I'm saying is the fact that somebody is prepared to take that sort of stance may deter people in the future from doing this sort of thing.
Joanne, thanks very much indeed. Well, let's see what you think. That's a very demanding Marina palette who wishes to be turned on again. I'm sure once is more than enough for most of us. John says, look, why shouldn't people be evicted? This is the problem with our justice system. There's always a reason for not penalising people who commit crimes. If you commit a crime, you have to be penalised. If this doesn't happen, then where is the deterrent? Peter says, at last, a council taking some form of decisive action. The looters can walk the streets with their new trainers to find new accommodation. Adrian in Leeds. I lived on the street for 4 years after being evicted because I was a student and could not afford my rent. I think it's wrong to hurt the perpetrator's family. They'll have 90 days before they're even considered homeless. They'll be forced into a different county to apply to go onto their housing list, so they could have a long wait for a new home. I've had friends kill themselves over being evicted. This is a knee-jerk reaction to a social problem. And Sue says, if their council properties are taken from them, where will they go? You can't have people living on the streets, so the taxpayer will end up keeping them in private housing. I don't know why they can't be sentenced to good old hard labour. Of Of course, they have human rights, but these could be basic shelter, food and drink. And Elaine in Cambridge, council houses should be taken away from rioters. They've disrupted a lot of people's lives, so it's only fair that they should have their lives disrupted. I think you should treat them like for like. It's the only language they can possibly understand. And now Nick's here. Hello.
Hello, Vanessa.
First time I've had the pleasure of making your acquaintance.
Lovely to meet you.
Very nice to meet you too, in your check shirt this morning. This afternoon, you're looking strictly country and western, as they.
Should see the cowboy boots under the desk.
Go on, let's have a look.
No, I haven't really.
Go on.
Yes, that's the tinkle of my spurs you can hear. The A1 heading south towards Newcastle upon Tyne looks very slow at the moment, past Brunswick Village. It's all after a breakdown, but the breakdown has been recovered. So if you're in slow traffic there, good news, it should start to improve now. If you're heading north towards Sunderland on the A19, there's an accident blocking a couple of lanes just before the Wessington Way junction, so slow there too. And in Lincolnshire, the A46 is partly blocked both north and southbound at Damon's Roundabout, which is just near Birchwood. A broken down lorry on the roundabout there is going to cause delays in and out of Birchwood for now. Northbound M42, a little bit sluggish between Junction 2 at Alvechurch and Junction 3A for the M40. It's all after an accident earlier on. And south of Cardiff in Penarth, the Windsor Road is closed. A lorry hit a railway bridge and overturned. So not only have they got the lorry to deal with, then they'll have to assess the safety of the bridge. Windsor Road closed between Bridge Street and Plassey Street. I suspect that'll be closed for a good while. A couple of things in Northamptonshire, the A6 past Market Harbour is closed in both directions after an accident between Rockingham Road and Desborough. And the eastbound A14 past Kettering is blocked between Junction 7 and 8. A car and a caravan involved in an accident there. Finally, slow on the anti-clockwise M25 towards the Dartford tunnels. A lorry has broken down between Junctions 1B and 1A.
Thanks very much, Nick. Delightful to make your acquaintance. On the line, the Reverend Ross Rennie in Cannock. Hello.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Reverend. Now, you think that chap from Wandsworth Council's got it very badly wrong?
Yes, I do, because my argument is, obviously, the kids are out of control. The problem many parents that we experience are having is they're having problems controlling the kids.
What do you put that down to? Is it because they haven't been parents with any kind of...
I put it down to a lot of legislation that's come down through the years that I've been alive, which has prevented parents from actually dealing with their children properly.
When you say dealing, do you mean smacking?
Well, I'm afraid so. I mean, Vanessa, I come from a very tough background. I was a bad lad. I was a lad that was very much like these lads, except I never got caught.
Do you not think, though, Reverend, though, if you and I and the lovely listener were all to go on a tour of Her Majesty's prisons, the length and breadth of this country, we would find that most of the inmates there had been physically admonished by their parents. They had a jolly good beating on a Friday night and a jolly good clip round the ear hole, and they ended up inside anyway.
I don't think it's the beating. I think is that when you take away the responsibility of the parents to control their children, who controls them?
But why do you say take away the responsibility of their parents? After all, smacking is not the only available punishment, and we're still, as you know,
didn't do me any harm. It actually kept me out of prison.
But we're still allowed to smack our children as long as we don't leave a visible mark. And many people will think that's the hallmark of a civilized society.
That's not correct. You can, and when your child reaches 16 or 18, if you do certain things to you lock your child in a room, stop them from getting out of the house, you will be prosecuted by the police yourself.
But when your child reaches 18, your child's no longer a child but an adult, and we can't go around locking other adults in rooms, can we? Whether we want to or not.
Look at the 11-year-old girl. Did you see her in Nottingham the other day? Her attitude towards the church?
You mean the 11-year-old who refused to apologise, even though
she couldn't care less.
But there was her father there telling her to apologise, and he said he was appalled.
But the point is, when I was like them, you wouldn't have told me either. I would have told you where to push it. Right. I would have said to you, back in them days, you don't know what you're talking about. I don't care what they do to me. When people get to the state where they don't care what you do to them, what are you going to do to them? Put them back like we did 100 years ago? Stick them on islands, start putting them on penal colonies. Do we want to go back to all that stuff?
So you're saying don't throw them out of their houses, but do allow the parents to...
Get the perpetrators. I think if the children have been involved and they're over 16 or 18, I think the council have the right to bar them from the house. but not the parents.
Thank you very much, Reverend Rennie. Appreciate the call. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Daniel in Bradford. Is Daniel on the line? No, he's not. I've got a message from him here. It says Britain would be the only country in the world to protect criminals like this. In Switzerland or Germany, they'd instantly be put away for a minimum of 5 years with all their benefits stripped from them. Why should the middle class pay again for these people who don't want to work? And Darcy says not only rioters should be evicted from social housing, but all lawbreakers should be evicted. It is part of their tenancy agreement, and if they've broken that, they should be evicted. They should not bite the hand that feeds them, and if they do, they should be punished. Rob says, so, we have a family of 3 children, 2 are very bright, and 1 is easily led. Are you saying you put the good people on the street just because of 1 bad person? This is absolute madness. And Gerald in Carnarvon, council tenants should be evicted if they were caught rioting. It's a breach of their tenancy agreement. Something positive could come out of their eviction, though. It'll make them think twice before committing another crime.